Hello. Well, here we are back again for another year, another corn season. We're getting ready to do that. And I've got a short presentation here that I'd like to give to talk a little bit about what's coming up in 2021. In particular, I'm going to focus on selecting a corn hybrid here today for a short video and hope that you're able to learn some things from here that you'll find valuable. First of all, I just want to say how my hat is off to you. You've been a very brave group of people, you farmers, to put in a crop this year, take the risk of all the costs and stuff associated with that, and yeah, it's let's just face it, the world is in fear right now. We've seen a lot of fear. You were very brave to go and do what you've done this past year, and I wish you the very best here in this coming season here. Now, that's not to say that it's all gone the way we would hope for. For instance, here's what my year has been like. In history has had no setbacks.
It's peaking.
Oh, it's peaking. Okay. A good person in history is. Yeah, let's just say it didn't all go as smooth as I planned. Those videos are a little more challenging than they might look from the outside. At any rate, I just do want to talk to you a little bit here about some things that I think you need to think about here as we move into this next year. You know, prices are on the increase. The opportunity and outlook for corn is exciting here. I think we're going to see some strong prices all through this 2021 uh, growing season. So the thing to do is to grow corn, do it well, and like you do in a difficult season is the same as you do in a season that you have a lot of problems. You focus on the important stuff. Today we're going to focus on one aspect, and that is choosing your corn hybrids wisely, trying to do the very best job of picking that right hybrid that fits your location. We talked about why this was so important last year, and this picture was just really tells the whole tale here. You can see this is Greene County in 2019. We had some dry weather. You can see some of these hybrids just fell to pieces. Others are beautifully green, still functioning. We had a range of yields here from over 200 bushel to less than 40. So if you were smart and picked that 200 bushel hybrid, you smiled despite the adversity. But if you picked that 40 bushel hybrid, it wasn't much smiles going on there. So indeed, I think it's important that we understand how to do this and how to do it well. It's the same thing from last year in 2019 we saw in 2020. Here now, this doesn't look as striking because this picture was taken closer to harvest. But you can see here there's differences. You can pick out 4-row hybrids in this plot. If we zoom in here and look at it very closely, you could get even a better idea how much diversity or difference there was in hybrids here. You can see here we're looking at, you can almost pick out the plot boundary right here. And on the left-hand side there, right off the 4 rows we're looking down, which are one hybrid, you see a hybrid that's almost completely burned up. It's a nest. And then you see off to the left and to the right hybrids that are varying levels of greenness. So indeed, a lot of difference, and that's not maturity we're looking at here. This was stress, and stress in a very short distance. So it's not stress related to just because this was a wet hole or a dry place. It's stress that was related indeed to the genetics that hybrid had itself. So, what makes this year exciting, not just from the price standpoint that we're getting or potentially getting for corn, but the fact that we now have some new tools that allow us to do things we've never done before. For instance, this corn variety selection tool that's now available encompasses all the data that has been collected over the years in the corn OBT. So there's data here not just on yield, but on the soils that those plots were growing on, how much rainfall they got over the season, how tall that corn got. In the past, we haven't been able to examine our hybrid selection from the standpoint of rainfall or soil class Today we have that capability, so we could do a much better job of focusing in on exactly the right hybrid for us, for that field, that individual environment. So that's what's exciting here. And I want to talk about that today. Now, as you may have already found out, if you visited the website, you see the web address ncovtmedius.re. You visit this and looked at this, there's some learning to do, isn't there? As with any new software tool, and this is true about any software program I've ever used, you got to do a little work to get to the information you have. And I think that's particularly true right now with this tool. You want to come to this tool with questions. You want to ask the right questions so that you get the right answers. And I'll show you here what I think those questions should be, and I'll show you a little bit on how I think you can get to the answers. So let's talk about what questions should we be asking as we come to this variety selection tool. Well, these are my questions. Now, I've written them out in a different way as statements here, but in essence, I'm asking questions here. First of all, I ask the question, what maturity class should I select? Now, that's a question you're not going to answer in the tool itself, but it's a question you should have on your tongue or have answered as you go to that tool. That's where you need to start. You want to look at, because maturity makes all the difference in the world in how corn hybrid responds. I'll show you that in a minute. The second question I have is, once I have a maturity class, what's the top consistent hybrids that have performed over the year and over multiple years in statewide trials? I'd like to know how consistent those hybrids were within that maturity class. Then once I have that, I want to then understand how well they performed in my local trial, something on my soil type. In fact, now is where I might select some information that I'd like to know on soil type, or if I know how much rainfall that I've been averaging over the last several years. Then you can see some other questions I have here. I'd like to ask other farmers, or perhaps other records, what they've found. For instance, what your hybrid company's seen that's done well in your area. Then I want to ask questions that, again, have information in the OVT, such as how tall was the hybrid? How good was it at standability? What was its stay green characteristics? And other traits such as BT, of course, and the herbicide tolerant packages. And then, of course, the last question I want to ask is, will it do well for me? I can see it does well in on this database. Does it do well for me? And that, of course, requires that I go to my field and try it out on my farm. So let's start with this first question. I don't have time to deal with all these questions today in this short video, but I want to show you how important these questions can be to you. Let's start with this maturity. Why would I select an early maturing hybrid? Well, there's a number of reasons. They have an advantage in emergence. These hybrids are mostly developed, these 90 to 105 day hybrids are mostly developed from Minnesota and the Dakotas. Their soil temperatures aren't even 60 degrees when they plant these corn seed. So these hybrids have been selected in difficult emerging situations. So they have an advantage in emergence, best on poorly drained, cool soils. Now, I don't want to plant an early hybrid on a sandy or droughty soil because it's going to grow quickly and reach maturity quickly. It doesn't have any time to waste on stress. So if I get 5 or 6 days of dry stress on that hybrid, an early hybrid doesn't recover, whereas a medium or late has some time to recover from that stress that it went under. It's best when planting in April, better when dry weather occurs late in the season. So indeed, an early hybrid gets it done before that dry weather starts to affect that corn. So where would an early fit in 2020? Well, here's a good illustration of where an early hybrid, if you'd known all the factors that were going into this field here, would have been your best choice. In this case, the farmer was planting on April the 7th. We had cold, wet weather that first week in April. He planted and it went right back into several days of cool, wet conditions. We had, of course, a late dry period. And just remember I said these are best when or better when planted in a situation where there's a late dry period. And you can see here from this data, the highest yield in Greene County on this soil. Now this, I agree, this is a coastal plain site, but it's not a droughty soil here. It has some water holding capacity, it's a Lynchburg, so it's got some water holding capacity. Look at what did the highest. It's 2541, only a 91-day hybrid, 175 bushels. Even the 111-day Pioneer 1197 is right up there at 165. And there was actually several, 5 to 6 hybrids between 90 and 111 days that were over 150 bushels. Now, what was the lowest? That's 117, that late maturing hybrid there. You can see there were some late maturing hybrids that did much better than that, certainly. Some of these have some stress tolerance. That 5566 is not a great stress hybrid, but these others do. And those aren't bad yields. They certainly would make some money at $5 corn. But you can see our best yields were when we selected that early hybrid. It was the right fit for that environment. So there's where an early hybrid fits. You're planting early. It's been a cool, wet spring already. It's forecast to be a cool, wet spring. You're thinking that maybe there's hot weather's coming in late in the year. There's where you tend to lean toward an early hybrid. Now, don't do that on a real sandy, droughty soil, but this soil would fit very nicely. Where would a medium hybrid fit? Well, here's a great illustration of medium hybrid parameters. They're best when dry weather occurs late in the season. In other words, if I got a droughty soil that I can't put in early, this hybrid fits very nicely. It still gets most of the work done before that dry weather comes on. So this is one that's better on these dry, sandy loam soils where stress can be a problem. And it's best when we're planting after it starts to warm up, mid-April to early May. So let's take a look at where that would have fit in 2020. There's Sampson County, Goldsboro Silt Loam, and you can see the highest yield there was a 5065, 115-day medium hybrid, 187 bushels. The Pioneer in late 1197, the 1464 Pioneer, they're all really good yields in this environment. And in point of fact, there were several between that 111 and 115 day that were at the top of this trial. Now, yes, that Augusta 7168, 118 day, that certainly did very well. Again, that's a good stress-tolerant hybrid. But you had to get lucky to pick that one. There's only one or two of them in that range, that and the Pioneer, that would have really fit this year. Whereas you could have picked them almost several, you had a good chance of picking a medium hybrid that would have done a very good job for you this year. Notice how the lowest was that 2540. Very similar genetics to the one we just looked at in Greene County, but only yielded 33 bushels. Do not put an early hybrid on a droughty soil. How about late hybrids? Well, here's what we'd like to see on late hybrids. They're best on very productive soils with good water holding capacity. They can be planted from early April to mid-May. These are the hybrid, our go-to hybrids in many cases. When we want to yield all we can yield, we want it in the field for as long as possible without stress. And if we got good soils that minimize stress, we want a late hybrid. Clay loam soils in the Piedmont, good illustration of soils that hold water that we can use, and certainly in those river valleys out there where we can use a late hybrid there. Best when dry weather occurs early in the season, which of course wasn't the case in 2020. But where did a late hybrid fit in 2020? Well, here's Terrell County. And you can see that indeed a late hybrid was a really good fit in Terrell County here. You can see the highest yield was that 118 day. In fact, that was one of the latest maturity materials in the test at 229. Oh yeah, we had some good yields in the mediums there. Certainly very close or similar yields in some of those other late maturing materials. But it's really the late maturing materials that were most consistent here. Well, even for that matter, the early 91 day hybrid, I can make money at that. It wasn't the highest yielding because it didn't grow long enough, but we had the water at least to do fairly well. That was the same hybrid you saw in Greene County. So you can see here, the situation for selecting hybrid maturity depends on when you're planting, It depends on what your conditions are at planting. It depends on when you think dry weather's coming. It depends on your soil's capability to sustain that hybrid through the season. So what does that might look like here in 2021 of the summer? What's our outlook here for corn season this coming year? Well, just as the outlook is for price, why the outlook for weather is very good here. We're in a La Nina season. That means we do tend to be a little cooler. We're going to have less energy in the atmosphere, which means our storm fronts won't be as strong, but they should be consistent, is what it looks like in 2021. If we get dry weather, you can see here on this point here, third from the bottom, above average temperatures in April or May with dry conditions. There's where our dry, if we get dry weather, it's going to be May, June, perhaps to the 20th of June at the very latest. That's going to be our driest, warmest period of the season. So do I want an early hybrid? No, I sure don't. Because that early is going to get hurt and it's not going to recover. So I'm looking at cooler, better average rate, above average rainfall in late summer, and a warm period in August. And usually we get some rain in a La Nina season during harvest time, so we could expect some harvest rain in this season. Pretty good forecast for corn. So if I was going to project, I've done this last 2 or 3 seasons, project based on planting dates and growing degree days, when we needed to plant to avoid the stress. So the red there are dates I'd like to avoid. They have the potential for being dry and warmer. So I don't want to plant a 100 or 1200 day relative or 1200 day GDU to silking hybrid on April the 5th. In other words, I don't want to plant an early hybrid early in the season. If I'm going to have to plant an early hybrid, I'm going to plant it later, when it's got at least the chance to get that silking past that hot weather. Whereas a late hybrid, I got time for it to recover, medium and late, so I got time to recover. I can plant them basically anytime. If you look at this is actually a good chart. Normally I got lots more red on this chart than I have in this year. So it looks like if we can avoid certain types of hybrids, maturity groups this year, we should be in the fluff. So here's the dashboard of the hybrid selection 2. Again, it's ncovt.medius.re is where I've gone here. And the first thing I want to do is ask this question that we just asked about maturity. So I'm going to go to analytics here. I'm going to click on analytics. I'm going to pick me a trial year other than the 2021. Let me start with trial year 2020, and we're going to select some data fields here. So I'm going to, what I want to look at, of course, is yield. So I'm looking for yield in this data set, and I'm going to build some analytics around yield here, and then I want to do some examination of these hybrids here. So I want to do some filters. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm preparing the way to start this process. I've got corn. I've selected the trial year that we're in, 2020. I've selected from the drop down the information I'm first off. I'm interested in yield, and then I want to filter because I want to start looking right away at maturity. So I select my data field here. I'm going to drop down here to relative maturity. There she is. And I'm going to now have to decide what that relative maturity is. So I've asked these questions. Do I want an early? No, don't want an early. What's my situation? I'm a coastal, let's assume I'm a coastal plain. I'm not, I've got this early dry weather coming in. So I'm either wanting to think about a medium hybrid or a late hybrid. So let's take a look at a medium hybrid. We're going to look at it, maturity group between 110 day and 115 day. And we're going to filter this data set. So this way it gives us an opportunity just to look at these medium hybrids. That's what we're most interested in. And the first thing I want to know then is consistency, isn't it? So I'm going to go over here to statewide and I'm going to choose statewide, and it immediately filter or immediately sorts these by highest yield. So here's the varieties I ought to be looking at. I got Dynagrow 55 BC 80, 65, 69. So those are some, I'm going to choose these hybrids here as being some that I'm very interested in looking at here. So I'm going to choose these top 5 hybrids. Well, let's just go 10, top 10 hybrids here to take a look at. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. We'll choose these top 10 hybrids. Now, the next thing I want to do as I'm looking at this data set is I'd like to know how they did in my local area. So let's say I'm in Robeson County here. If I sort this again, well, now you can see that in Robeson County, some of these didn't do as well. So for instance, the DKM 6569 is still the LC 1307, this LG hybrid here, 2 of these L and the Dynagrow 55V C68. So I'm not so interested in some of these other hybrids as I am in these top 5 hybrids. So I'm going to go ahead and compare these selected hybrids that I've just selected from this database for this type of analysis. So now I've got some data on them. I've got the test weight. I've got ear head stalk height. I've got how much stalk lodging was noted in these tests. I've got information on how many tests they were in, how many years they were in. So I've got a lot of data here that I can use now to make this selection. So you can see here how this would work in selecting a hybrid. So that's what I wanted to bring here to you today. In conquering this brave new world of corn production, the first step is a foundational one, and that's selecting hybrid. We now have some tools to let us do some of the things that we'd like to do. So know your genetics. How will your hybrid stand up to stress? Maturity class should be our first consideration. Consider it. The consistency should be the second, and then get down into the local hybrid. So with that, I'm going to end this presentation. Certainly, if you have some questions, why, give me a call, 252-217-9418 or ron_heiniger@ncsu.edu. I hope you have a great year. I hope you've seen some things here that give you exciting about where we're headed and what we can do in 2021.